afternoon and welcome to the American University Museum at the Katzen Art Center. This is the third collaboration we've done with the Washington Print Club. It's the biggest and baddest yet. It's always a pleasure working with the Print Club, the fanatical Print Club members, and Chris Witt. And we brought in some hired gun. And Tim Doud has really works very hard to sort of try to shape this show a little bit to some kind of coherency, or not. But it's a great show. People love it, so there you go. So I want to thank you, Chris and the Washington Print Club, and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Jack. I was checking some time ago, and the first show we did here was back in 2007. And Jack and his crew were so kind enough to allow us to come back, even though we're big, bad, quite expensive. Before we launch into the discussion, Tim Doud, who is the curator of the show, a professor here at American University, and one of the founders of Stable, a new arts community here in the city, he and I will banter a few questions back and forth. Then we will open it for questions, and then everybody will have a little bit of time afterwards. I was told, and I hope I'm correct, that you have until 4:30 to stay in the show afterwards. You don't have to leave right at 4. The other thing I'd like to say is that there are 45 lenders to the show, and there's close to 160 pieces here in the show. So if you would like to have your work in the show the next time we do one of these shows, talk to myself or any of the members of the Washington Print Club, or look us up online and join the group. We're a hailed and hearty and wonderful group who do lots of fun things like put on a show like this. Fun at least when it's up, not necessarily while we're working on it. But I also wanted to take a minute to thank people. I wanted to thank, of course, first and foremost, Tim for the incredible work he did to realize the show and to select the pieces to guide us as the show came together. And as his intention was, it's not only showing you what portrait can be, and some of these are things you never would have thought were portraits, but it also gives you an interesting look at what the Washington Print Club is collecting, the breadth and depth of the collections that people have formed and that they're willing to lend. As I said, there are 45 lenders here. I'd also like to thank the Washington Print Club volunteers who helped out. First and foremost is Lorena Bradford, who I don't see here. She just had a baby, so I didn't expect to see her here. But through blah, 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 and high water, she was the one who kept the checklist, who was the point person for correspondence, for doing the day-to-day work to make sure this thing all came together, and helped and worked with Tim to do the research, or not the research, the writing for the texts that are in the little brochure that you may have gotten. And I'd also like to thank the selection committee who worked on the show to view the collections, to choose pieces, and then to sit down with Tim to decide which ones of the pieces everybody selected would get in the show. And they would include George Benderly, Brian Weinstein, Beverly Swift, Chris Danino, Joan Filson, Jenny Freestone, Nancy Hirschbein, and Bob Roach, and Eve Stockton. Finally, and I know I'm going on way too long, I want to thank the staff here at American University for their assistance, their help in making all this a reality. Elizabeth Cowgill, Sarah Leary, Jessica Ponechevsky, and most particularly Kevin Runyon, who is the lead installer who put this show together. And just between the two of us, he is a student of Tim, so Tim knew he was going to get the best results. So, having gone on about all of this, I'd like to turn to some questions that Tim and I have come up with. And then again, as I said, afterwards you feel free to ask ask questions. I lectured a lot, and I always loved laser pointers, and I got one here too. So we could, but anyway, I thought it might come in handy if we wanted to point out particular pieces. In any case, the show, as you can see up here, is called Good Form, Decorum, and In the Manner. Portraits from the collection of Washington Print Club members. And I'd like to begin by asking Tim what the heck the title means, and how was that title chosen?
Well, I was asked to do this, to curate, and I have to say, I think we should curify what curate means in this particular show, because of my relationship to the portrait. And I could talk about that for a while, but that would use our time very well. But as I was considering my own relationship to the portrait, I'm really interested in the portrait as a genre, and I am interested in how we generalize that genre, and I wanted to challenge that. So that explains the title. So this was also a big experience for me in learning. I think I got into 6 or 7 people's collections, and I only made 2 prints in my life, and they were done over the last 2 years. So I am not an expert in printmaking, and a lot of what was here is printmaking. So I was really learning through the studio visits, and I knew some of the collectors beforehand. I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I have a great deal of respect for Chris and Beverly's collection and others. So as I got into into collections, I actually was learning as much as I was curating, and with great interest. So I really enjoyed the studio visits. I wish I could have gone to every collector's house up to 45 people, but I only got to, I think, 6 or 7. So as I was looking at people's collections, I was learning a little bit more about what a good print looks like. So the title is very literal. So the good form has to do with the qualities that make a piece of artwork good. So formally, I was interested in much of the work that's in the show. And as I learned about the process of printmaking, I understood why these pieces are in people's collections. Decorum has to do with my relationship to the portrait. So much of the, there's an expectation from a portrait. And we can talk more about that if you guys want to in this conversation. But for me, this expectation that one might have of a portrait, some of these portraits meet. So I call that decorum. The portraits are meeting our expectation. Others perform in the manner. So that's my explanation.
All right. Don't forget, there's question and answer afterwards.
And I'm a professor, so you can challenge me all you like.
But just to add, as we noted, or I noted, we've had several shows here before, but this is the one with the most amusing and interesting and intriguing title. So even if Tim doesn't curate future shows, we should talk to him about titles.
I really think that I organized this show. I don't think I curated it. I think we curated the install, I'd say that. Because that's where the curation happens. So, Chris, why did the Washington Print Club decide to do a show of portraits and self-portraits?
The Print Club is, as I alluded to, a group with very eclectic and broad range of collections. And over the years, we've done different shows, some of just miniature works. The last show we had here was Your Best Pieces, which was done when the Print Club turned 50. back in 2014. And we had then just your best pieces. And we've had different themes. We had a theme of love once. We had a theme of work. We've had different themes. But what occurred to me was that in all of that, we never did a show of portraits. Now, I have to qualify that because in doing some research, I realized, and some of you may remember, back in 1992, we did a show of portraits from Washington Print Club collections. However, it was just very prosaically called Portraits from the Collection. That's what we got here in this exhibition. So I knew from that, and from just, as I said, anecdotal information, that we'd never done a portrait show, and I sort of figured that everybody who is a collector has at least one portrait, maybe more. And what made it interesting is, yes, indeed, people had portraits. They had lots of portraits. What made it interesting, and again, as you walk through the show, you'll see what I mean. Some of them, including Beverly and myself, never realized that some of the pieces in this show are portraits. That was thanks to Tim, who said, well, that's a portrait. And there's a piece in the case there by the Schallenbergers, which looks like just a bunch of scratches on a piece of paper. But if you look at it, yes, it's a portrait too. So not only did we just go with portraits of faces and things like that that are very recognizable, we found a whole bunch of things that we never thought were portraits, but that actually are.
Does everyone know the Schallenberger piece? Have you guys looked at it?
Yes. Unfortunately, it's over in that case over there.
It's a very long piece. I think it's 12 feet long.
It's in the glass case there.
And it's an endurance piece that is about his own experience. So it is a portrait of him. It's a self-portrait. Yeah. Over time, a very specific amount of time, his movement. I got that right? Yeah.
And then Beverly and I have the piece in the show. This thing can't go that far. Up in the corner there, this is Undoing What You're Reading About, which is by an artist named George Herms, but his portrait too, because he is doing this and announcing.
He's the eye.
He's the eye, right. So there are traditional portraits, and then things like we've been saying that are stretching the definition of what a portrait is and make it very clear that people in the print club have a lot of portraits beyond just what you normally would think when you said we'll do a show of portraits. And that is why Tim and others went to the homes of people to see what they had to offer and found things in there that they hadn't necessarily thought would fit, but were portraits.
And then there's the piece, where's Andrew?
Andrew.
Jesus,
Oh, there it is.
which is out of Andrew's collection, which I would say parades as a portrait, but really is about something else. So that one you could put into a work that's around conceptual art.
Yeah, there's as somebody that I used to know said, there are many ways to skin a horse, and there are many ways to look at portraits. And
in many ways to use a single line.
yes, as the head of Christ over there, if you look at it carefully, it's just one continuous line that's pressed harder or lighter, and it just keeps going out and out. So I mean, there's just tour de forces in the show like that when you look at them, you begin to whoa. And that's what, 1649, Andrew, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's early. Anyway.
My turn.
It's my turn. Well, I mean, both of us can work on it. How were the works chosen, and what was the process, and what is the role of the curator?
So I would say that's why I think it should say organized and not curated, because the framework of the selection is very complicated. There are how many people in the print club?
About 150.
Yeah, and everyone who is interested can submit a work, but also a single piece of whatever someone offers must be taken. So if someone's offering 5, one it will be included in the show. If someone wants to include 1, then they've curated the show because they've just basically chosen, whatever the single piece that their offer is. And then the committee meets, and there are more than, I think there are probably twice or 3 times as many pieces that are here.
Easily.
Yeah, and then we make selections and narrow. And then the curating comes. There's one of our committee now. The selection comes, or the curating comes when we entered the space. There were, all the spaces were lined, or all the pieces were lined up through the space. And then we had to make a decision how they would be hung. So, yeah.
And the thing to add to that is that as the process evolved, as I alluded, we had various people that went out to each collection and looked at what they had. So what they brought back, we sat with Tim and we all went through all of these lists of things, much more than what's in the show. And so it was a long, sometimes tedious, but very instructive process to look at all these works, which were, shown as JPEGs and things. We didn't have the real work in front of us to finally choose the works that were going to be in the show. And of course, with blind optimism that I had, I never thought about, well, how many pieces could we actually put in this space? We just said, let's take whatever we want. And lo and behold, it worked.
We already answered this. We just answered that.
Oh, never mind.
You have to ask me a question.
I'll ask Tim.
He just answered his own question.
I sort of, and I didn't pay attention, that's my fault. Okay, so I'll ask, I'm going to jump back to the question which I will deal with, but I'll jump to the other one. Is there anything in the show that surprised or delighted you?
A lot. Wow. Well, I really enjoyed the piece you just indicated from your collection, because it was a surprise and very interesting. I think there were a couple of pieces, and I can't even remember their names now, that really, they looked like snapshots. And they were made in entirely different times. You'll see one in the first grouping. And those to me they were humorous. They were portraits because of the way that the artist laid out the subjects. So they function as a different kind of portrait.
Well, I mean,
And a lot of these, like I love the wanted poster,
yeah.
which I think is probably, in terms of a portrait, that's the portrait that most people know of Angela Davis. So if there's like a singular portrait of her, it's actually that one. So you never know. I enjoyed a lot of the pieces that on this wall. And the range of these pieces I found very interesting.
In a sort of general comment, what I find most interesting about the show is that despite the fact that in the 21st century we don't look far more, but we see far more abstract, non-objective pieces, it's gratifying to me to see so many figurative works that nevertheless still maintain a presence and resilience and a sense of able to maintain themselves, even though abstraction may have sort of taken over. And the other thing that interested me, again, as portraiture moved from earlier times into the 21st century, how abstraction has been incorporated into portraiture and has become part of what makes a portrait. So you don't just have a figure in all their regalia or photorealistic sense. You have it distorted and changed and manipulated, but it's still a portrait. It's still recognizable as a human figure. And it can get even more complex than that, but it just suggests to me again the resilience of traditional old art forms that go back hundreds of years, that they adapt, they change, and they continue to work ahead into the 20th and 21st centuries. Sometimes, as we've been pointing out, in ways that we don't necessarily anticipate, but lo and behold, they're portraits.
You know what's really stood out to me about this whole process? I thoroughly enjoy going into people's collections because I like to see what collectors were making. And I felt like often people were making something quite interesting that they accumulated with great intent. And going through people's collections with them, I was very interested in where the curator's energies were and the surprise. So the surprise was just such an exciting part of getting into people's houses, seeing where their energies were, seeing pieces that they maybe hadn't thought about the same way that I did, and pieces that I had not thought about in the way that the collectors did. And that, to me, is something that's really rich among the group, which I think, should be exploited because it's really exciting.
All right, now.
Oh, I'm asking you. Choosy. Oh, okay, Chris. What do you think about, what do you think the exhibition says about the Washington Print Club and its members?
Maybe we should discuss this among ourselves. No, there are several things that
Can I clarify this?
No,
In many ways, this is a portrait of you.
yes, exactly. And that was from the get-go, which when we talked about the exhibition title, we didn't have a title for the longest time because Tim rightly said, let's see what we get. Let's see what the items look like, and then we can begin to see not only a title, but it will also be a snapshot of the print collectors who give their works to show. Because having said that, let me back up and say that one, again, as I alluded to, I knew that people in the group had portraits, so I wasn't worried about that. And I knew that, as I said, also collecting portraits is sort of a mainstay in many collectors. What I also realized is that all of you, as lenders to the show, or even members, love not only to have your works in your collection, but you love to talk about them, you love to show them, and you love to have others look at them. And on top of that, what it shows me is that there is a breadth and a depth of collecting among the print club that is often totally lost sight of because we don't do shows like this that often. We should do more, but the amount of work it takes is sometimes daunting. But it shows me that not only are the depth and breadth of the collections large, the curiosity, the innovation, the sense of taking a chance on a work of art is phenomenal. People actually are collecting things that when you see them in the aggregate, think, wow, this is really amazing. I mean, these people have collected all this wonderful art and all these different techniques, and some of them in techniques that, you know, at least maybe I've never seen before. I've never seen anybody like that sort of soldier at the corner down there that's on ruffled paper. I've never seen that before, a technique like that. So it just shows you how, and although, to be perfectly honest, there was a piece that was going to be in the show that was withdrawn because it was considered too delicate, and the lender didn't want it in the show, but it would have been a piece of knit material. So
Yeah,
it was
sculptural.
It was sculptural, and it would have been in the show, but they just decided it was too precious, too delicate. Anyway, so what it shows me is that even though portraiture, as I said, has grown and expanded and enlarged itself in terms of what it is and how it can be done, so too have the print club collectors expanded, enlarged, and gone on to not blink an eye and say, oh, careful on that, that's not a portrait. They went out and they bought it, and they're willing to show it. And some of that is here.
As for that.
This is like stuff the curator. This is the question that some of you are going to go, oh yeah. Why are the sections unidentified, and why are there no labels? Yeah.
So when we came in, as I mentioned before, everything was either lined up on the wall or on blankets on the floor. So the installers thought they were just simply going to hang them up as they had fallen into the space. And I said, no, we can't do that. So we decided to make our own private categories. And we came up with 15. And so we just decided to categorize and categorize and categorize. And then we divided these categories into their 15 homes. And then we broke the categories and started recategorizing categories into other categories. So some categories absorbed categories. Like, for instance, we had a category of photography, and then we decided that was a bad idea. So every subcategory had to absorb the photography. And then we were really interested in pieces within our subcategories that could be in conversation with one another. So we thought about which pieces should sit next to one another in these structures. And the interesting thing that's happened through the categories is people keep sending me pictures of things that they're amused by. So, or they think are formally interesting. They're sitting next to each other. And that really was part of the play. So sometimes, it actually is true to the title. Sometimes they were related because of form. Sometimes they were related because of content. And that's really what we're doing. We didn't label them because we wanted them to operate as pieces. So we thought that labels would really distract from the pieces. So I take, if anyone's mad about that, my fault. I really like the idea of almost treating them like art installations. So that this is why I'd rather call this an art project by me than a curating project, because I really liked the idea of using this collection, which came together in such a kind of, I want to be careful in wording here. There's something almost kind of random about the way the works came together, even though they're brought in the framework of the portrait. And I wanted to really play with that.
I mean, I have to add that when I came in and saw it, as Tim said, all the works arranged along the floor, I almost threw up my hands and said, what the heck are we going to do? I mean, again, they're portraits. How are we going to divide them into groups? And thank God Tim said, as he alluded, let's come up with categories. So we just went down the list, and we had little post-it notes, and we put category 1, category 2, category 4, category 5. And then we let the art installers group them according to which groups we'd established. And then,
with some advice.
Yes. And then we went back and we, as Tim said, we merged some and moved pieces around so that I think 15 became like 7 or however many we have here. And the result is, as Tim said, a work of more a project, a spontaneity, a free-form exhibition that created dialogues between pieces that are interesting in and of themselves, let alone groupings that we put together. And as we were saying, the idea of labels would have distorted the visual beauty, the art part of the installation that we all lose sight of because we never pay attention in broad sense to how a show is installed. And here it really jumps out at you that it's installed in a very creative, very artistic way that would have been somehow lessened by all the labels. You look like a lot of butterflies or something flying around all of these works of art.
Well, it pulls you away from
Yeah.
immediately identifying them, and it puts you into a place of looking at relationships. I mean, if you want to know what they are, and you're lucky, you can find a list. Because I remember one night there was like 2 lists.
Yeah. But the last thing is, I think the show, the print club people, Tim, all of us think that what makes this show and many other shows so interesting is curiosity. When you want to learn, you want to find something, you want to broaden your horizons. And many of the people who collected these works were doing that for themselves. But the way we have them here, without definition of sections, you create your own idea. You see your own dialogue between pieces. You sort of get the in-joke if that's the point, or you see the seriousness of why those 2 words are next to one another. And it gives you the chance to be more involved rather than just read the label and move on.
We should just rehang it in the middle of the show.
So I don't even know where I guess it.
Can you tell us what some of those organizing
No,
categories are?
no.
No?
That's up to you.
Yeah, you can make your own category. Some I think would
I told you one.
photograph.
But
But that disappeared. That disappeared. Got welded into other. But some of them are a little. But some of them are clearer, but others are distilled because they have other things thrown in which we didn't originally put in.
Yeah, but they actually were
But they
four
work. Yeah.
combinations that actually made a lot of sense.
They made sense to them. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, as the saying goes, a camel is something made by committee. So, you know.
I like how active you guys are getting.
Well,
I hope
we're
it's
the ones
public.
who give tours.
Oh!
We're trying to figure out what's going on.
Are there any more questions? Because I don't think our questions.
Well, we have, let me see, otherwise we'll open it up. Okay, let's, hold on, Roberta, the lady with the, has a microphone. Or, I'll get you. Yes.
For those of us who are not knowledgeable, can you give us some information about what makes a good print? What are we looking for?
Is Andrew here?
You're on the spot,
Andrew, come on up.
I'm hiding.
No, I mean,
So, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
give it
I
that.
think I want to be very clear. Is Phil Sanders here? He's a master printmaker.
He was.
Phil?
I thought he was Skip.
Skip Barner, maybe the 2 of you can talk about that.
We're calling.
I've only made 2 prints.
We're calling on Andrew because he was a print curator at the National Gallery for 40-some years.
Well, I think that of course, one of the interesting things about this show is that you have many different types of prints, okay? So prints break down into different kinds of techniques, from original engravings, etchings, lithographs, woodcuts, densitints, and so forth. And their representations, aquatints, of almost all of those techniques here. But there are 2 kinds of the question splits into 2 types of questions. One is what makes a good work of art, because a good print is a good work of art. And so there we get into composition, expression, chiaroscuro, all of those good general subjects which relate to paintings, drawings, prints, everything. But then specifically what makes a good print, once we get beyond let's distinguish that into making a good matrix. So a good wood block or a good lithographic stone or a good copper plate is one thing, because some good images are lousy prints because they get ruined when they get put onto the matrix. So that's another aspect of it, making a good matrix. And then finally you have what is so distinctive and so crucial for all of us as Washington Print Club members what makes a good impression. So it's a great thing. That's why print collectors are so much more intelligent than other collectors.
Okay, I'm going to move this on because you opened the door for Wendy Legrees, who was the curator of prints and drawings at the National Gallery, or the National Portrait Gallery. And could you talk about the conceptual side of this question?
What a portrait is.
Like, what's a good portrait?
What is a portrait? I want to start with that.
Right.
And you can either define it narrowly as an image, recognizable image of a real individual, which we did for years at the National Portrait Gallery, or you can open that idea up and think about self-expression as a bit of a self-portrait and abstraction as maybe having some conceptual basis in the individual. So there are different ways of interpreting what a portrait is. And I think it's fun in a collection like this to open that question up and see all the different ways that one could conceive of portraiture. It really comes down to an individual. The subject really is about people. And, but there's so many different ways, as we can see, of interpreting that.
You curated Face Value, and to me that was one of the most powerful exhibitions I'd seen on portraiture. Could you talk about that show a little bit? I think it would be really interesting for this context. It was at the
At the National Portrait Gallery, I guess in 28?
Yeah.
No, 20?
It's an exhibition.
Anyway, I can't remember what it was, but it was a few years
It's
ago.
an exhibition that took the form of an argument, I felt.
Well, it was about portraiture during the age of abstraction. So it was about portraiture being really out of fashion. And art, but you can't tell artists what they can and can't do. So they put their finger in their nose and did portraiture anyway. So we were looking at people like Chuck Close and Elaine de Kooning, who didn't care that everybody else thought portraiture was out of date and old-fashioned. And they were inventing new ways to try to conceive of the portrait and then new styles in which to interpret portraiture.
Yeah, and engaging a lot of social movements.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to go to Skip. Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I guess a quick question of what qualifies a pure watercolor as a print? In other words, where she just says watercolor.
Oh, it's a works on paper.
Oh,
what is a work on paper?
So anything that's a work on paper qualifies as a print?
No, it's not.
It's works on paper.
It's work on paper.
Yeah, print is within works on paper.
I got it.
Actually, you guys have to explain that because you are calling yourself.
I don't understand why.
You're right. You're not calling yourself Washington Works on Paper. You're calling yourself Washington Print Club.
Print club, and it's not a print.
Right. Well, it sort of piggybacks onto what Wendy said, is that the print club, well, let me be specific. For years and years, the print club did not consider photographs. But now we do. And so we, like artists doing portraits, are expanding the definition of print to include things that are not prints, like a watercolor or a photograph, but they are works on paper. And that's the book that we used. Plus, to be honest, we're looking for new members, so anybody who has a watercolor photograph, it's a print. Come join us.
Washington Works on Paper Club.
That's no fun. That's not a fun time.
Yes, I have a different type of question that maybe I could answer if I looked around the room very carefully. Are any of the portraits of people in the group or of their families? And if so, what kinds of discussions did you have about those?
Public, you have to answer that question because we don't know.
Not that I'm aware of. Although again, if somebody here.
And not to invade anyone's privacy,
Right.
but does that puzzle you?
that people didn't include portraits of
No.
Not really, because they selected them for their artistic value rather than their sentimental
Yes,
value.
yes, yes. Or at least through the filtering process, that's what happened.
I was just curious.
And now for a commercial break.
What
I
a
would
brand.
like to point out that at this very moment, there is a fabulous portraiture.
Use the
Portrait
mic.
gallery.
Use the microphone.
Use the microphone.
Microphone.
Oh.
Otherwise, you would miss stuff.
Pulled it up already. All right. I'd like to point out that at the moment, there is a wonderful portrait show at the National Portrait Gallery that everyone should see. It's called the Outwind. No, yes. And so what we have here is a portrait show representing several centuries. What we have there is really up to the minute where portraiture is at the moment.
Exactly.
So if you like this show, you will love that as well. And Wendy was too modest to top that.
Yeah.
And to add to that, that show includes performance.
Yes, in video.
Right.
All sorts of
And
things.
to add to that as well, Tim has been in the Outwind and did this show too.
So the Outlet is every 2 years?
3 years.
3 years.
Okay, so people should know that, because it's been showing contemporary portraiture now for
Right.
I don't know how many
And-
years.
It's an interesting compliment to both of you at the same time.
And as this dialogue suggests, it shows you again the fluidity of definitions.
This is a very self-serving question. There's probably obviously lots of wonderful collections in your club. Is there any way someone can access who's collecting what? For instance, I'm interested in Rockwell Kent, and I know that there's one Rockwell Kent here. Is there a way that someone like myself who is interested in a particular artist could find who is collecting that? Because it's not so easy to find.
Guy in Baltimore, Nancy, the collector in Baltimore we visited.
Streets?
He's a dealer. Yeah. He could help you.
Conrad Graver?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not what he does.
I'd like to answer that. Excuse me. I'd like to answer that. Join the Washington Print Club. Put an ad on paper, our journal that comes out twice a year. And it could be a question, and we could even have a column. When somebody is looking for a particular artist, be it the subject matter or the maker of the work, we could have an area, a column in our biannual publication where people can ask other members. And I'm assuming that every member reads the on-paper thoroughly and would find a common spirit out there interested in the same thing that they are.
So that would
Thank
be
you.
our ISO column, right?
In search of, yes, ISO column.
Yeah.
Another way to find out who's collecting what is many artists have had a catalog raisonné assembled, and those catalogs could be found in the art libraries, perhaps the National Gallery Art Library. Check those, and it does list who owns what.
I have a question for Tim. Where does portraiture fit into the arts education of your students or students in general? Is there an interest on the part of the students? I think if this show could be visited by art students across the whole area to expand their idea of portraiture and what the possibilities are, it could generate a lot of interest.
Well, the good news is somebody here, I think, is a student that wanted to talk about this show, so totally I'm glad you're here. Is it you? Yeah, it's you? Okay. All right, so there's one. I've been contacted by the art history program, and they want me to engage their students. So yeah, I think students, I mean, in terms of like portraiture classes, probably not very common in most universities and art schools. Yeah.
mean to put in another plug. Many of you may or may not know that at the National Gallery, you could make an appointment and go in and see works of art. Much of the collection is online. You can look up what you want to see, like Rockwell Kent, and you can make an appointment at the National Gallery and look at them face to face.
I want to go back to Tom's question. Often when people take an introductory class, they are introduced to working from life. So they may engage with the portrait in that way. But it's, genre-specific teaching is less common. So, I don't know, Skip wanted to say something back there.
Yeah, I assign self-portraits in my class, every class. And I think in beginning drawing, that's one way to get people to do drawings is to, the students do self-portraits. But I wanted to go back to what is a good print. Tim says he's made 2 prints. He's actually made 3. And one of them didn't work. It failed. It wasn't a good print. So maybe he knows a little bit about what a good bad print is. And then the other thing, I did have a question about the Christian Reddy. That was the one, I looked at all of them, and that one stumped me as far as.
Which one?
The Christian Reddy.
Which one's that?
It's the viscosity print. I don't know exactly where it is, but that one, of all of them, that one stumped me the most as far as.
You have to tell us where it is. Oh, that's one of the cases that was our only option. So it's in the show because I think that was the only person offered.
The only person offered.
Yeah, and we're like,
Apparently there is a figure in the middle. It's behind Skip, it's by Keiko Hara, that one right there. That is hard to see the figure in the very center.
all right. Thank you.
All right, and remember, join the Washington Print Club. Yes.
Oh, did you
What is there? Was it?
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, I have one last one. And this is for Chris. How common is it for print clubs, I know there are many across the U.S., to do exhibitions like this that feature the work of its members?
One of my gut responses is there's not that many print clubs, or as many as you would think. And there was, and I say was, in Montreal, I think, and they just disbanded because there was not enough interest. The problem is generating new members and keeping the group going. So there's a lot of young people here. Think about joining the print club. On top of that, a lot of print clubs are associated with museums. So they are more likely to have works that either they have purchased for the museum or works that they own in shows at the museum. We are very different because we are totally separate from any museum. And so we have to go, hence again, my thanks to Jack, hand in hand to find a museum, an institution, whatever, that will host us. So there are different ways that people are, the club is organized, and that in itself would begin to tell you how or if shows are done, and if show when and where and all that. As I indicated, I have been very remiss between 2014 and now. Normally we would have been doing shows in between. It's just that it didn't work out that way, but that would have been our way, is by doing shows hopefully every couple of years. We're good.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody
Say that in terms of imagination, it looks like the print club is alive and well.
You bet, you bet. We are. And we're looking forward to the next 50 years.